Guys, welcome back to today's video. So today we're going to be going through the New York primary results that pretty much have a lot of implications for the Democratic Party, being a very Democratic state, and just looking at the results individually. So there was a contested governor's race in terms of the Democratic primary. Andrew Cuomo was easily selected by the established Democratic base that had a somewhat type convention where they did choose their nominee, but then it did go into a primary. Andrew Cuomo easily won there. Cynthia Nixon is the Bernie Sanders progressive type candidate who got 34.4% against an incumbent Democrat in this state. So Cynthia Nixon did pretty well, and I do believe her being on the top of that governor's ticket led a couple of other progressives in the state Senate to victory in their primaries, because there are a couple of these races where I have the progressive candidate cheat just based off nationally endorsed, progressive candidates, and I went through each one. And yes, they did lose some races. They lost all statewide races in terms of progressive candidates, but they won most of their Senate primaries, and the ones that they did compete in. They did pretty much beat these incumbents by considerable amounts too. These weren't too close of races. So I think Cynthia Nixon definitely drove out turnout and got people elected, or will get people elected in the general election that otherwise wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for her. So I'm not going to say that it's completely her. I think there is a new wave of progressives in states like New York, even in my home state of Maryland with Ben Jealous, in Florida, Andrew Gillum, who actually is leading in a new poll that we will be talking about today in my other video. Overall, progressives are pretty much taking over the Democratic Party, and there was a lot of argument whether or not they're going to have as big as a presence as they did in 2016 with someone like Bernie Sanders, and I truly think that they will. They are starting to inch their way up into some of these lower level races that'll lead them into things like Senate elections, governor elections like they did in my home state of Maryland, and also some other type of elections, possibly House elections, things like that really will impact the way the Democratic Party sees its future, because in 2006, they didn't have anything close to this. They didn't have something drastically tearing the Democratic Party apart. They never focused the Democratic Party on attacking other Democrats, spending a lot of money attacking other Democrats, which is exactly what they did here in the New York primary for the governor's race. Cynthia Nixon, not too politically active, still Andrew Cuomo having a lot more political experience, she was able to get 34.4% of the vote. So let's just go through the results from here and compare it to 2016. So we're just going to go through a run through of 2016. We're going to ignore the Republican side, because if we look at the statewide elections for the Republicans, uncontested, uncontested, and uncontested. So nothing really to see there. But for the Democrats, there is something to see. This was Hillary Clinton's home state. She was a senator from the state, first elected in the year 2000, then reelected in the Democratic wave year of 2006, and then resigned this position for the Secretary of State position, in which Kristen Gillibrand took over. But she was able to win this Democratic primary with exactly 58% of the vote, compared to Bernie Sanders' 42%. Look at the county map. The green is where Bernie Sanders won. He won in some big cities like Albany, especially in counties around that area. I mean, he sweeped it. If it was based off counties, he would have easily won this primary, but it wasn't. If you look in big population centers like New York City, Syracuse, Buffalo, areas that really have a lot of population compared to some of these smaller counties, compare Hamilton County to, Brooklyn. 1,730 precincts compared to Hamilton County, which is 11 precincts. Yes, Bernie Sanders did win this, but there were less than 1,000 voters, less than 400 voters, to be honest with you. Obviously, these areas that have 100 or near 300,000 voters obviously have a lot more impact. So there's a reason why Clinton won a couple counties and won the primary. But Andrew Cuomo won a lot more counties than Hillary Clinton did, but still only inched up a little bit more by maybe around 6% more. 8% more than what Hillary Clinton got in 2016, but winning a lot more counties. So there wasn't this drastic takeaway. There wasn't a huge upset. Cynthia Nixon was expected to get these numbers according to polling, so it wasn't too much of a surprise, but it's always interesting to see an incumbent have a contested primary. Hillary Clinton blew out Bernie Sanders in the primary here. Andrew Cuomo did the same thing with Cynthia Nixon. This is completely comfortable for him. But some of these state Senate races may not be in the favor of the incumbent Democrats. So here's where the races actually got a little bit closer. In the lieutenant governor's race, Williams was the progressive candidate. Keep in mind, Kathy Hochul, I believe, is the incumbent right now, and she won with 53.3% of the vote. Look at the counties. For some reason, this race was closer, but the incumbent won more counties than Andrew Cuomo and Hillary Clinton. So this race was closer for whatever reason, but also if we go down to areas like New York City, in an area that pretty much dominated for the incumbent governor, they must have flipped their ticket. Voted for progressive in lieutenant governor's race, voted for the incumbent governor in the regular governor's race. It could be the candidates, it could be different type of ballot, whatever. The progressive candidate did pretty well in the lieutenant governor's race, but was just a couple thousand votes off, not thousand, a couple, around 100,000 votes off from winning the primary there. Another race that the progressives did fail to capture was the attorney general's race. Teachout was the Democratic progressive type candidate in this race. Keep in mind, James, there are no incumbents on this ballot, by the way, but James won by winning these few counties. So again, all the other counties voted against them, but still, vote splitting did occur because won by a plurality, not by a majority. Clearly, there are areas that typically go for progressive type candidates. We see it here. We see it in the primary for the governor election. Yes, there's a little bit more blue, but still, the margins are roughly the same. In terms of the attorney general race, progressives didn't win it, but still, it was close. It was decided by less than 10%. So keep that in mind, especially in a state like New York, which is typically Clinton territory. Yes, the majority of the state, in terms of counties, may be progressive Democratic populations. But in terms of the bigger cities, New York City, Syracuse, again, a number of these counties that currently have big cities are typically voting for establishment Democrats. However, like I said before, there are currently 6 new Democratic nominees for state Senate races that were otherwise not even possible at that would have no possibility of even being competitive in these races 2 years ago. And that's pretty much the new progressive type movement. So the progressives fielded around 8 candidates in the state Senate races. I didn't go into the state assembly. It's a lot more to go through that. But state Senate, we're going to start off with District 11. So the incumbent there lost in the Democratic primary, and this was a pretty good amount. I believe that's John Liu, if I'm not mispronouncing it, versus Tony Avella. Tony Avella was the incumbent, lost with 47% of the vote. The progressive candidate won with 53%. So again, there was definitely some type of disconnect between the establishment Democrat or incumbent Democrat and their voting base because their constituents weren't happy enough to reelect them, especially in a primary. We're seeing this time and time again, whether it's a House race, state Senate races, state assembly races, state legislature elections in general, governor races. We are seeing progressives start to have more of a say in these elections than they would have before. So we're seeing one in New York. Maybe we didn't see it in the governor's race or the lieutenant governor's race or attorney general race. Yes, they were closer than previously expected, but still, we're not seeing some drastic change in a state like New York. When we come down to these individual races, some of these districts are taking a little bit more of a turn because of the fact that if we look at some of these races, Cynthia Nixon didn't do better than Bernie Sanders, but in some areas, she was able to lead these people to victory. So, District 11, let's compare District 11 to where it was in the year 2016. So, Tony Avella went uncontested. Keep that in mind. There was nobody who truly believed that they could beat them in the Democratic primary. There are a lot more Democratic candidates this time around, and they may not all be progressives. They may just be Democrats who are currently unhappy with their Democratic senator. And overall, Tony Avella easily won because there was no candidate. Finally, being put up against a candidate and losing would be a shock to an establishment Democrat, but we're not done there. We go over to District 13. The incumbent lost against Jessica Ramos, and this is a 10% margin. We go down to District 13, again, another uncontested race from 2016. So clearly, these incumbents thought they were safe in 2016, and pretty much the district did itself because they didn't run any candidates, and they didn't run a contested GOP primary, whereas at this point in time, we see Jessica Ramos, who defeated her Democratic incumbent by 10%. And there are going to be parts where they do lose. For example, District 17, where the incumbent won by a considerable amount. This was a huge amount. Morris was the progressive type candidate, getting 34% of the vote, compared to District 17 in 2016, an uncontested race. Pretty Democratic of a district because there were no Republican candidates, but there is now in this race here. But the Democratic incumbent did win by a considerable amount, but right over in District 18, Salazar defeated the incumbent Democrat there, 59% to 42%. I don't know how those numbers add up, but I guess they do. Still, that is a considerable amount. That is larger than a 15% win. We go down to District 19 from 2016. This incumbent won with 76% of the vote. So there has been a huge disconnect in this past, District 18, my bad. Actually, still, a 60% margin isn't too bad anyway. I pointed out the wrong district, but oh well. Pretty much still, we're looking at the margin here of 59%. That number looks very familiar to this incumbent. 59% losing with 42% of the vote. I guess it should be 41%. I don't know what happened there. But with 40% of the vote, keep in mind that something drastically changed. And that is considerable. Having an incumbent lose by this margin, I mean, sure, 6% margin could be arguable. 10% margin, not so much. But reaching out over 15%, says something about the district, says something about the candidates, and says something to the Democratic Party. Because typically, in a Democratic wave year or a Republican wave year, there isn't much mix-up within the party. We're starting to see that now. Whether or not this was the right year for progressives to push their movement like they did in 2016, that's up to them, because it's not stopping. They're not stopping what they're doing, and they're going on to win a number of these primaries. We're just going to cover a couple more because this video is going a lot longer than I expected it to be. In District 20, a win for the Democrat there. If we go down to District 20 in 2016, another uncontested race. So again, new candidates, new winners. District 23 was a loss for the incumbent. A loss for the progressive there. Only got 21% of the vote compared to where it was before. Still an uncontested race, but not enough to flip it at all. In District 31, this was a race where Jackson defeated the incumbent by a considerable amount as well, 56% to 39%, again outside that 15% margin, making it safe for that candidate. Compare it to where it was in 2016 in District 31. This one was a contested race because it was an open seat, but still, having an incumbent who won before doesn't look too bad because it was their first term, but still, having the incumbent always helps you in terms of primaries. And the final race that we're going to cover is District 34, where I believe BIG is, I guess that's how you pronounce it. I don't know what's up with these numbers. 55 to 46% doesn't add up. Adds to more than 100%. But the incumbent did lose there. You compare it to where it was before, an uncontested race in 2016. Not the best look for Democrats. If they're losing in races that were previously uncontested, shows that a lot more Democrats could be vulnerable in future elections. So major takeaways, nothing huge statewide in terms of the governor's race, lieutenant governor's race, or attorney general's race, but also the state senate is going to have a little bit more progressives come 2018. So thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I'll see you all tomorrow.